A massive stone circle was built before the pyramids, the wheel, or farming existed. This is Göbekli Tepe, a 12,000-year-old temple, forcing historians to rewrite the story of civilization itself. By the end, you will understand why this single discovery shatters the timeline of human progress we all learned in school. Who were the mysterious builders capable of such a feat, and what powerful purpose compelled them to carve a menagerie of wild beasts into towering pillars? What does it mean when the evidence suggests religion built society, and not the other way around? How does it feel to realize our ancient ancestors were far more sophisticated than we ever gave them credit for? That shepherd's name is lost to history, but his simple observation set everything in motion. On a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, his sheep grazed around what looked like just another pile of old rocks. Yet something about them seemed off, too regular, too shaped by something other than nature. He mentioned it to local museum officials, who took a brief look and filed the information away. For decades, the hill called Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill, kept its secret, its true nature buried under centuries of accumulated soil. The scientific world was not yet ready for what it held. The key figure who finally listened was a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt. In 1994, having studied earlier reports from the region, he visited the hill. He saw those same protruding stones the shepherd had noticed, but where others saw rubble, Schmidt saw architecture. He recognized the clean, sharp lines of worked limestone. With a small team, he began to dig. Almost immediately, they hit not a medieval graveyard, as some had speculated, but something infinitely older and more profound. They uncovered the upper portions of enormous T-shaped pillars, each one meticulously carved from a single block of stone and arranged in distinct, deliberate circles. The scale was staggering. Some of these pillars stood over 18 feet tall and weighed more than 10 tons. The initial excavation was a puzzle with pieces that made no sense. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, featuring elaborate carvings of animals, scorpions, foxes, cranes, and lions, rendered with an artistic skill that should not have existed in that era. But the real shock came when organic material from the site was subjected to radiocarbon dating. The results were unequivocal and earth-shattering. The structures were built around 9,600 years before the Common Era. That places their construction firmly in the Pre Pottery Neolithic period, a time when humanity was supposedly living in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. This was not just old, it was anciently old, predating Stonehenge by around 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids of Giza by a staggering 7,000 years. The timeline of human achievement, as written in every textbook, was suddenly and completely wrong. In an instant, a single carbon date transformed a curious archaeological site into a historical anomaly of the highest order. The monumental question it raised was simple yet devastating to conventional theory. If complex, cooperative society is supposed to be the product of agriculture, allowing people to settle down and build cities, then who built Göbekli Tepe? The site emerges from a world without farms, without permanent villages, without metal tools, and without the wheel. It forces us to reconsider the very engine of civilization. What powerful, unifying purpose could have compelled scattered groups of hunter-gatherers to come together, to plan, to quarry and move these colossal stones, and to carve them with such care? The answer to that question lies not in the soil, but in the symbols staring back at us from the stone. These circles were not haphazard arrangements. To walk among them at the height of their use would have been to enter a forest of stone, a sacred geometry etched into the earth. Göbekli Tepe is not one temple but a complex of at least 20 distinct circular enclosures, each one a self-contained world of symbolism and architecture. Picture a series of immense, round rooms carved not from walls, but defined by a ring of monolithic, T-shaped pillars standing like silent sentinels. And at the heart of each circle, two even larger central pillars loom, often reaching heights of over 18 feet and weighing more than 20 tons. These were not just posts, they were statements. The sheer scale of the material is the first clue to the impossible task these people set for themselves. The limestone for these pillars was quarried from the local bedrock, a hard, unyielding stone. Using only stone tools, flint picks and hammers, teams would have had to painstakingly carve out these colossal blocks from the living rock. Then came the truly Herculean part, the move. The nearest quarry was several hundred meters away, across rough, rolling terrain, without domesticated animals like oxen, and millennia before the invention of the wheel or even simple carts, the only engine available was human muscle. How did they do it? The most likely scenario, based on studies of later megalithic cultures, involves a combination of log rollers, rope made from plant fibers, and the coordinated effort of hundreds of people pulling in unison. It was a feat of logistics, communication, and raw communal will. But the sophistication does not end with the move. Each pillar was then carefully set into a precisely carved socket in the bedrock floor of the enclosure. This is not just dropping a stone in a hole, this is foundational engineering. The sockets were shaped to hold the pillars upright and stable, potentially for millennia, which they have. This required forethought, a master plan drawn not on paper but in the collective mind of the builders. They had to quarry the stone to specific dimensions, knowing exactly the size and shape of the socket waiting for it. This speaks to a project overseen by individuals with specialized knowledge, a proto-architect directing a willing workforce. When you stand before that reality, the old story of scattered, simple hunter-gatherers just trying to survive the day completely falls apart. This was a society that could marshal labor, feed and organize large groups of people for extended periods, and pass down complex technical knowledge from one generation to the next. They were not just reacting to their environment, they were reshaping it on a monumental scale to serve a purpose far beyond shelter or storage. The architecture itself is the proof, a stone testament to a level of social organization and technical ambition that rewrites the opening chapter of human civilization. What could possibly have been important enough to justify such an immense, back-breaking, generation-spanning effort? The answer is carved into the very skin of the pillars. The silent stone sentinels of Göbekli Tepe are not just impressive for their size, they are a cryptic message carved in limestone. Their defining feature, the enigmatic T-shape, is a puzzle that scholars have been trying to solve for decades. Look closely at one of these pillars. The broad, flat crossbar sits atop a long, vertical shaft. To some researchers, this form is unmistakably human. They see the crossbar as stylized arms folded across a chest, and the shaft as a body standing in silent vigil. This interpretation is given weight by the intricate details occasionally etched into the stone. On several pillars you can find carvings of hands with fingers clearly defined, resting on the front of the crossbar. Some even feature belts or loincloths, items of personal adornment that leave little doubt these stones were meant to represent beings. They could be revered ancestors, watchful guardians, or perhaps deities of a forgotten pantheon, their faces left intentionally blank to represent something beyond a single individual. This transforms the enclosures from simple meeting places into halls of the ancestors, spaces where the living communed with a powerful, unseen community of the past. Yet not all experts are convinced by this human reading. Some propose the T-shape is purely abstract, a powerful geometric symbol representing a gateway or a portal between worlds, a marker of sacred space itself. The truth may lie somewhere in between. a symbol so potent it could hold multiple layers of meaning for the people who built it. What is undeniable is the consistency. This specific, complex form was replicated over and over across multiple circles over centuries of construction. That repetition is the key. It tells us this was not one artist's whim. It was a shared symbolic language, a set of architectural rules so deeply ingrained in their belief system that every builder, every stone carver understood the template. They were participating in a ritual of creation that reinforced a common identity and a common purpose. In this light, Göbekli Tepe becomes more than a temple. It is the world's first monumental canvas. These pillars are the earliest known large-scale figurative art humanity ever produced, predating the cave paintings of Lascaux and the statues of ancient Mesopotamia by thousands of years. They represent a colossal, collective outburst of symbolic thought, a desire to make the intangible tangible, to give form to the forces that govern their world. Each animal carving, each mysterious symbol, is a word in a lost language, and the T-shaped pillars are the grand sentences holding the entire story together. To understand that story, we must listen to what the animals are trying to tell us. But the true language of Göbekli Tepe is written in the animals. Covering the pillars, weaving around their edges, is an entire stone menagerie, a snapshot of a wild and untamed world. The carvings are not simple scratches, they are exquisitely detailed reliefs, the animals emerging from the stone as if caught in mid-movement. You see the sleek, cunning form of a fox, the elegant, long neck of a crane, the coiled menace of a snake, and the powerful, charging bulk of a wild boar. Predators like lions are depicted with a palpable sense of ferocity, their forms communicating raw power. This is not a peaceful pastoral scene. This is a vibrant and dangerous bestiary, a catalogue of the creatures that shared the landscape with the builders, creatures that commanded respect, fear, and perhaps reverence. One of the most telling details is what is not there. In all this elaborate artwork, you will not find a single image of a domesticated sheep, goat, or cow. Every animal portrayed is wild. This silent absence screams a crucial truth, reinforcing what the carbon dates told us. This site was conceived and created by people who lived in a hunter-gatherer world, a world where survival depended on understanding the habits of these very beasts. The art is a mirror held up to their reality, so why carve them here with such painstaking effort on these sacred pillars? The purpose remains one of archaeology's great mysteries, but the theories are fascinating. Perhaps each animal represented a different clan or family group, a totemic symbol that announced who helped build this enclosure. When people from distant areas came together for gatherings, their pillar, marked with their fox or crane, served as a stone banner declaring their identity and their contribution. Another idea looks to the heavens. Could these be early constellations, a map of the night sky etched in stone, linking their rituals to the cycles of the stars above? Or were they spirits of the hunt, invoked to ensure success and abundance? Some researchers propose a more protective role. They point to the particularly fierce or venomous animals like scorpions and snakes, often placed in prominent positions. This has led to what is called the skull cult theory, a concept that suggests these animals were guardians. Their job was to ward off evil spirits, to protect whatever sacred or ceremonial activities, or even the resting places of individuals that were housed within these circles. They were stone sentinels in a spiritual sense, using their depicted power to defend the sacred from the profane. Regardless of which interpretation feels closest to the truth, the conclusion is inescapable. This elaborate iconography represents a rich and fully formed mythological tradition. These people were not just surviving, they were storytellers on a colossal scale. They were weaving narratives about their world, their place in it, and the unseen forces that governed their lives. They had moved far beyond basic subsistence into the realm of abstract meaning. The stone carvings prove that complex symbolic thought, the very bedrock of religion and culture, existed thousands of years earlier than our traditional histories ever allowed. This was a society with a shared imagination, and they invested unimaginable labor to make that imagination permanently, physically real. But to maintain such a grand vision across generations, they needed something more than symbols. They needed a revolutionary new tool. This brings us to the central mystery, the very purpose of the place. What was Göbekli Tepe for? The prevailing theory, championed by its discoverer Klaus Schmidt, is both simple and revolutionary. He called it the world's first temple. The evidence on the ground is surprisingly clear. Unlike other ancient sites from later periods, archaeologists have found almost no signs that people lived here permanently. There are no foundations for houses, no large hearths for daily cooking, no trash pits filled with domestic waste. Instead, the hilltop is dominated entirely by these monumental, ceremonial enclosures. This paints a powerful picture. Göbekli Tepe was not a village, it was a destination. Imagine scattered bands of hunter-gatherers roaming across the landscape for most of the year. Then, at a designated time, perhaps following the migration of game or a particular phase of the moon, different groups would converge on this sacred hill. They came not to live but to gather, to perform rituals and to reaffirm their shared beliefs. The site functioned as a regional hub, a spiritual anchor point in a nomadic world. This gathering itself would have been a feat of social engineering, requiring pre-arranged schedules, shared oral traditions, and a common understanding of the site's profound importance. But the most haunting clue to its ritual nature is not in its use but in its deliberate end. Several of the magnificent stone circles were not simply abandoned. They were carefully, intentionally buried. Thousands of tons of soil and rubble were manually brought in to fill these enclosures, entombing the pillars and their carvings for millennia. This was not an act of vandalism or conquest. It was a planned, labor-intensive act of closure. Scholars interpret this as a final ceremony, a ritual burial for a sacred space that had served its purpose. A circle might be used for generations, hosting ceremonies that bound the community together, and then, when its time was done, it was returned to the earth with reverence. This practice transforms Göbekli Tepe from a mere building project into a living tradition with a defined life cycle, a cycle of creation, use, and sacred retirement. This cathedral on a hill model does more than explain a single site. It turns traditional history inside out. For over a century, the textbook narrative was clear. First came the agricultural revolution. Farming allowed people to settle down in permanent villages, which led to food surpluses, which then allowed for social stratification, specialized jobs, and finally, the construction of temples and monuments. Religion, in this old view, was a product of complex society. Göbekli Tepe stands that logic on its head. Here we have the Grand Temple first, built by people who did not yet farm. This suggests a breathtaking possibility. What if the human urge to come together for something greater than mere survival, the drive to worship, to create shared meaning, and to build monuments to that meaning, was itself the original catalyst? What if it was the need to maintain this sacred place, to feed the hundreds of people gathering for rituals, that actually prompted the first experiments with cultivating wild grains? In this light, civilization may not have invented religion. Religion, and the powerful social glue it provided, may have invented civilization. The temple came before the town. This idea reshapes our entire understanding of human motivation, suggesting that our earliest great works were born not from practicality, but from a profound need to connect with something beyond ourselves. Yet, if this was a temple, what powerful experiences unfolded within its stone circles? The standard story of human progress is a simple, logical chain. First, we learned to farm. Farming allowed us to stop wandering, to build permanent villages. With stable homes and surplus food, we gained the free time and social complexity to develop gods, priests, and temples. In this narrative, religion is a luxury product of a settled, agricultural society. It is the elegant roof on the house that farming built. Göbekli Tepe does not just question this story, it dismantles the entire house and asks us to rebuild it from the ground up. The evidence is stark and undeniable. This monumental complex was completed around 9,600 years before the Common Era. The earliest clear evidence for the domestication of plants like wheat and barley in this region does not appear until roughly 1,000 years later. The builders were not farmers living in a village. They were hunter-gatherers who returned to this sacred hill season after season, generation after generation. This creates a fascinating paradox, a chicken and egg problem on a civilizational scale. If they were not settled farmers, how could they possibly muster the labor, the planning, and the sustained effort to build it? The answer may lie in the project itself. Think about what constructing Göbekli Tepe required. It was not a weekend endeavor. Quarrying multi-ton pillars, moving them across the landscape, carving intricate art, and setting the stones would have taken months, perhaps even years, of coordinated effort. This demanded that large groups of people stay in one place for extended periods. They needed shelter, they needed water, and most critically, they needed to be fed. You cannot move a 20-ton stone on an empty stomach. This is where the revolutionary idea takes shape. The very act of building their temple may have forced these people to invent a new way of life. To sustain the builders, the community would have needed a predictable, abundant food source. They could not rely solely on hunting and gathering, which would require the workforce to constantly disperse to find food. The logistical pressure of the project may have pushed them to deliberately cultivate the wild grasses growing on the hills around them. They might have begun to protect patches of wild wheat, to weed around them, to save seeds and plant them in designated areas. In this scenario, the temple did not come after the farm. The need to build and maintain the temple created the necessity for the farm. The social glue of a shared, sacred purpose came first. That powerful collective belief is what brought people together and kept them together long enough to require a revolution in how they fed themselves. This flips our understanding of human motivation. We often think of our ancestors as purely practical, driven by the base needs of food and shelter. Göbekli Tepe suggests something more profound. It hints that our deepest drive might be for meaning, for connection to something larger than ourselves. The desire to build something eternal, to honor the ancestors or the spirits of the wild, provided the compelling reason to cooperate on an unprecedented scale. That cooperation, in turn, demanded new solutions to practical problems, sparking the innovations that would define the next 10,000 years. In this light, civilization was not invented out of mere necessity. It was dreamed into existence. The temple was not the end product of society, it was the blueprint. This profound connection to the spirit world may have extended to the most intimate human experience of all. Among the stone animals and towering pillars, archaeologists made a discovery that adds a deeply personal, and to us, somewhat unsettling dimension to the site. They found fragments of human skulls. These were not simply remains left where they fell. They showed clear signs of intentional, posthumous modification. Delicate grooves had been carved into the bone, and in some cases the fragments were stained with red ochre, a mineral pigment often associated with ritual in the ancient world. This was not an isolated find. At a nearby, slightly later site called Menagerie, similar practices were observed, pointing to a widespread tradition scholars now refer to as a skull cult. In this context, the term cult does not carry its modern meaning. It refers to a set of ceremonial practices focused on venerating or showing deep respect for selected individuals after their passing. The curated skulls were likely carefully cleaned, perhaps decorated, and kept above ground, possibly displayed during important gatherings. They were treated not with fear, but with reverence, as tangible links to the wisdom and protective power of those who came before. At Göbekli Tepe, this practice transforms our understanding of the stone circles. If the enclosures were indeed places where skulls of revered ancestors were present during rituals, then the entire space becomes a bridge between worlds. The ceremonies performed there were not just about animals or abstract spirits. They were about family, lineage, and memory. They were about honoring specific individuals believed to hold influence in the realm beyond, who could intercede on behalf of the living community. This casts the silent T-shaped pillars in an even more powerful light. If they are stylized human forms, as many believe, then they are not generic statues. They become permanent, monumental representations of those same venerated ancestors. They are the stone counterparts to the curated skulls, giant eternal guardians watching over the rituals dedicated to them. The central pillars in each circle, the largest and most prominent, might represent the most important founding figures of a clan. In this view, building an enclosure was not just an architectural act, it was an act of remembrance and identity creation, literally setting their history in stone. This connection to ancestry answers a fundamental question about human motivation. What force is powerful enough to compel nomadic groups to return to the same hill for centuries? The pull of family, both living and departed, is a universal answer. Gatherings at Göbekli Tepe would have been reunions, times to reinforce social bonds, arrange partnerships, and collectively honor the lineage that defined them. The site provided a fixed point of memory in a mobile world, a sacred address where the community, both past and present, could be found. This layer of meaning makes the site profoundly human. It moves the story from abstract symbols and social theory into the realm of universal emotion. It connects these ancient people to us through shared questions about death, legacy, and how we keep our loved ones close. Their solution was to build a hilltop where stone ancestors stood watch, and where memory itself was carved into the bedrock of a new world. Yet, to maintain this sacred memory across centuries, they needed to master a force even more fundamental than stone, the very climate of the earth itself. The silent stones may have held their gaze not just on the animals of the earth, but on the lights of the heavens above. Another compelling layer of mystery involves the sky itself. Some researchers have proposed a fascinating idea that the layout of these ancient enclosures was deliberately designed as a prehistoric observatory. The theory suggests that specific pillars or the gaps between them could have been precisely aligned with key celestial events. Imagine standing in the center of a stone circle on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice, and watching the sunrise perfectly framed between two massive T-shaped monoliths. This is not mere speculation. Scholars like Giulio Magli have analyzed the orientations of the excavated enclosures, finding patterns that could correspond to the rising of bright stars such as Sirius, or to the solstice points that mark the turning of the seasons. If true, this connection transforms our understanding of the site's purpose. It would mean Göbekli Tepe was not only a temple for communal gathering and ancestor veneration, but also a colossal calendar carved in stone. It would be a precursor to later, famous megalithic observatories like Stonehenge, but constructed over 6,000 years earlier. This pushes the origins of systematic astronomy back into a shadowy, prehistoric past we are only beginning to illuminate. The implications are staggering. To track the slow, gradual shift of star positions over generations requires careful, long-term observation and record-keeping. It implies a class of individuals, early astronomer priests, who dedicated themselves to watching the night sky, memorizing its patterns, and passing that knowledge down orally. This was not casual stargazing, it was a science in its earliest form, born from a need to predict the changing seasons, to know when game might migrate or when wild grasses would ripen. Their sacred architecture became a permanent, fixed reference point, a machine made of stone to track the cycles of time itself. This idea casts the elaborate animal carvings in an entirely new light. What if the fox, the crane, and the scorpion were not just symbols of clans or protective spirits? What if they also represented constellations as perceived by these ancient sky watchers? The pillars then become a kind of stone storybook where myth and astronomy are woven together into a single, unified worldview. The rituals performed here could have been timed to celestial events, linking the community's most important ceremonies directly to the cosmic order. This blending of cosmology and spirituality suggests a depth of thought we rarely attribute to people of this era. They saw no separation between the earth and the sky, between the practical need to track time and the spiritual need to understand their place in the universe. At Göbekli Tepe, they built the framework to do both, creating a sacred space where heaven and earth met, guided by the silent, predictable dance of the stars. This revelation makes their disappearance and the deliberate burial of their great work all the more poignant. The sky they watched, however, was beginning to change. Around 8,000 years before the Common Era, something profound and deliberate happened at Göbekli Tepe. The people who had built this wonder, who had gathered there for generations, made a conscious choice to end its story. They did not abandon it to the wind, they did not let it crumble. Instead, they performed a final, staggering act of care. They buried their temple. They brought in vast amounts of rubble, soil, and the remains of countless ceremonial feasts, and they filled the magnificent stone circles from floor to rim, entombing the pillars and their animal guardians in a protective cocoon of earth. This was not an act of violence or conquest. It was a ritual of closure executed on a monumental scale. The question is, why? Why seal away a place of such immense spiritual power, a project that had demanded the labor of centuries? One compelling theory is that the world of its builders was transforming. The very ideas that had sparked the agricultural revolution were now reshaping society itself. As people transitioned fully to farming and settled into permanent villages, their relationship with the wild, untamed world symbolized by the temple's animal carvings may have fundamentally shifted. The old ways, the hunter-gatherer cosmology centered on wild beasts and nomadic ancestors, might have been fading. Burying the enclosures could have been a deeply respectful way to retire the old gods, to lay a powerful spiritual tradition to rest as a new era dawned. It was not destruction but a consecration, a way to honor the past by gently returning it to the earth from which it came. Another possibility is that the site was considered too potent to leave open. If these circles were portals to the spirit world or homes to immense ancestral power, simply walking away might have been unthinkable. Sealing them could have been a protective act, a way to safely contain that sacred energy, to prevent it from being disturbed or misused by future generations. It was the ultimate act of preservation, born from reverence. This intentional interment is the very reason we can study Göbekli Tepe today. That layer of fill created a perfect time capsule, shielding the delicate carvings from erosion, from later farmers who might have plowed the stones under, and from settlers who would have reused the magnificent blocks for their own homes. For 10,000 years, the temple slept, its secret kept safe under a blanket of soil, waiting for a curious shepherd and an archaeologist who knew how to listen to stones. The burial was not its end, but a long, silent pause between its first purpose and its ultimate one, to rewrite our story. To grasp the true scale of Göbekli Tepe's mystery, we must place it on the timeline of human history. Picture the most famous ancient monuments you know. The Great Pyramid of Giza, that iconic symbol of Egypt, was constructed around 2,560 years before the Common Era. The great stone circles of Stonehenge on the English plain began to take shape around 3,000 years before the Common Era. These are the wonders we are taught to marvel at, the pinnacles of early human achievement. Now hold those dates in your mind. Göbekli Tepe was completed around 9,600 years before the Common Era. That means this temple on a Turkish hill predates the Great Pyramid by over 7,000 years. It predates the earliest phase of Stonehenge by a staggering 6,000 years. This is not a difference of centuries, it is a chasm of millennia. When the stones of Göbekli Tepe were already ancient, weathered by thousands of years of wind and rain, the civilizations that would build the pyramids and Stonehenge did not yet exist. They were not even a distant dream. This comparison is not meant to diminish those later wonders, but to shatter our frame of reference entirely. Göbekli Tepe does not fit on the same graph. It operates on a different timescale, emerging from a world we have barely begun to understand. What was happening elsewhere on the planet during its construction? In this same era, human communities elsewhere were living in small, seasonal camps. They left behind simple stone tools, hearths, and the scattered remains of meals. These are the sites archaeologists expect to find from the Pre Pottery Neolithic, evidence of a mobile, hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Then there is Göbekli Tepe. It has no contemporary equal. Nothing from this period, anywhere on Earth, approaches its monumental scale, its architectural precision, or the sophistication of its artistic program. It is not the first step on a ladder we can trace. It is a lone, towering peak in a flat landscape, a sudden and inexplicable eruption of human genius. This is why it forces a global recalibration. For over a century, archaeology has mapped human progress as a gradual, linear ascent, with milestones appearing in a logical order. Göbekli Tepe stands entirely outside that order. It is not a missing link, it is a link from a different chain altogether, a beacon from a shadowy age that compels us to redraw every map and rewrite every textbook. Its very existence whispers that our story is far older, far more complex, and far more mysterious than we ever dared to believe. Who were these people capable of such a feat? The carbon dates are clear. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were Neolithic hunter-gatherers. They lived in a world without pottery, without metal tools, and without any form of writing. For generations, scholars pictured groups like this as small, nomadic families, constantly on the move, living hand to mouth, their social world limited to a few dozen individuals at most. Their entire existence, we assumed, was consumed by the daily struggle for food and shelter, leaving no room for grand projects or complex organization. Göbekli Tepe stands as a monumental rebuttal to that entire idea. It forces us to look at these ancestors not as simple survivors, but as visionary architects of their own destiny. The scale of the work tells a new story. Think about what it took to create just one of those massive enclosures. First, teams had to identify and quarry the perfect limestone blocks, using nothing but stone hammers and flint picks. Then they had to move these multi-ton pillars across hundreds of meters of uneven ground. After that, master carvers spent months, perhaps years, etching the intricate animal reliefs with stunning precision. Finally, the community had to carefully lower each pillar into its precisely carved socket in the bedrock. This was not a series of random tasks. This was a complex, multi-stage project that required different groups of people with different skills to work in concert, all following a shared grand design. That level of coordination does not emerge from a loose collection of families occasionally meeting by chance. It points to a society with a remarkable degree of social sophistication. To accomplish this, there must have been organizers, individuals who could plan the project and delegate tasks. There must have been master artisans, specialists who possessed the knowledge and skill to execute the intricate carvings, and who likely trained apprentices to carry on the tradition. There must have been negotiators and communicators, people who could coordinate between different bands, perhaps speaking different dialects, to bring them together for a common purpose. Most importantly, there must have been a powerful, unifying belief system so compelling that people from across the region were willing to contribute their labor, season after season, for a project whose completion they might never see. This suggests a social landscape far richer than we ever imagined. These hunter-gatherers were not isolated. They were part of a vast, interconnected network, a cultural sphere that shared symbols, stories, and a sacred destination. The hill of Göbekli Tepe was the beating heart of that network. It was a place where scattered groups solidified a collective identity, where they demonstrated their commitment to something greater than their immediate clan. This redefines what it meant to be a complex society. Complexity does not require cities, kings, or written laws. It can emerge from shared myth, from collective ritual, and from a common dream made stone. The builders left us no written records, but their social structure is written plainly in the architecture, a testament to a forgotten chapter of human cooperation that flourished long before the first brick of the first city was ever laid. The world these builders inhabited was one of profound transformation. The last great ice age was finally receding, its icy grip loosening across the continents. In the region we now call the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped arc of land stretching from the Persian Gulf up through modern-day Turkey and down the Mediterranean coast, this climatic shift was creating something extraordinary. The landscape was awakening. Lush grasslands spread, dotted with wild stands of wheat, barley, and legumes. Forests of pistachio and oak offered nuts and fruits. Herds of gazelle, aurochs, and wild sheep roamed in abundance. For the hunter-gatherer communities who knew its rhythms, this was a land of incredible natural wealth, a paradise of potential. This environmental abundance is a crucial piece of the puzzle. To gather hundreds of people for a massive building project, you need to be able to feed them. The rich, diverse ecosystem of the early Neolithic provided that necessary resource base. It allowed groups to come together in larger numbers, perhaps during seasons when particular foods were plentiful, to pool their labor and their knowledge. The hill of Göbekli Tepe, with its commanding views of this fertile plain, was not chosen by accident. It was a central point in a landscape of plenty. Yet this world of abundance was also a world in flux. Climate change was not a future threat, it was their lived reality. As glaciers melted and weather patterns shifted, familiar animal migrations could alter, and the locations of vital wild plants might change. This introduces a powerful and poignant theory about the temple's ultimate purpose. Some researchers suggest that Göbekli Tepe was not just a product of a rich environment, but a monumental response to the anxiety of a changing one. In the face of an uncertain climate, these early people may have turned to the only power they believed could offer stability, the supernatural realm. The construction of the temple could have been a collective act of supplication, a desperate and beautiful attempt to seek favor from the spirits of the wild, to ensure the continuity of the herds and the grasses they depended on. They were literally building their prayers into the hillside, carving the very animals they needed to survive into eternal stone, as if to will them into existence for generations to come. In this light, the site transforms from a simple place of worship into a profound symbol of human resilience. It represents our ancient ancestors' first great attempt to not just adapt to their world, but to actively negotiate with it, to impose a sense of order and meaning onto the unpredictable forces of nature. They were pioneers of a new kind of survival, one that relied not just on physical skill, but on social cohesion and shared belief. The temple stands as a testament to that pivotal moment when humanity began to move from being passive inhabitants of an environment to active participants in shaping their own destiny, using stone and symbol to anchor themselves in a world that was, quite literally, moving beneath their feet. This monumental gathering place may have served a purpose far beyond the spiritual. While the evidence strongly points to ritual and ceremony, some researchers propose a broader, more pragmatic function. Could Göbekli Tepe have been the world's first regional hub, a Neolithic convention center of sorts? Think about what happens when hundreds of people from different areas come together, not just once, but season after season for generations. They would have brought more than their labor and their faith. They would have brought stories, tools, techniques, and unique resources from their home territories. In the shadow of those great pillars, amidst the rituals, a vibrant exchange of everyday life would have flourished. A hunter from the northern hills might have traded a particularly fine piece of flint for a string of shell beads brought from a distant river valley to the south. Someone might have demonstrated a new, more efficient method for knapping stone blades. Elders would have shared knowledge about the migratory patterns of gazelle herds or the location of a reliable water source discovered the previous year. This constant cyclical convergence created a neutral ground, a safe space for interaction that transcended individual family groups, for nomadic bands who might otherwise have little contact, or who might even view each other with suspicion over hunting grounds. This shared sacred project provided a powerful reason to cooperate. It established a framework for peace. Within this framework, crucial social negotiations could take place. Leaders could forge alliances between groups. Young people from different bands could meet, forming partnerships that strengthened social bonds and prevented inbreeding. The site effectively became a social and genetic mixer on a grand scale, weaving scattered communities into a wider, interconnected network. In this view, the religious aspect was the glue, but the outcome was profoundly practical. The temple was not just where they spoke to the gods, it was where they spoke to each other. It was an innovation accelerator. The constant flow of people and ideas in this concentrated setting would have sparked cultural evolution at an unprecedented rate. A clever idea about tool making or food preparation, born in one group, could spread across the entire region within a few seasonal gatherings. Shared artistic styles and symbolic meanings, like the T-shaped pillars themselves, became a visual language that reinforced a common identity. This multifaceted role suggests Göbekli Tepe was a foundational institution. It provided the structure for complex social behaviors that would later define civilization, organized trade, diplomacy, shared technological advancement, and the establishment of common cultural norms. The temple did not just host ceremonies, it built the very fabric of a cooperative society. The spiritual and the social were not separate spheres, they were intertwined roots of the same great tree, drawing scattered people together and helping them grow into something entirely new. The carvings themselves are a testament to a forgotten kind of genius. Look closely at the limestone surface of any pillar, and you will see something that defies the era's supposed technological limits. The lines are not shallow scratches but deep, confident reliefs, with the animal's musculature and feathers rendered with an almost anatomical precision. The edges are clean and sharp, the curves smooth and flowing. This level of artistry was achieved without a single metal chisel. The toolkit of these Neolithic masters consisted of flint blades, obsidian points, and stone hammers, materials we associate with basic survival, not high art. Imagine the process. An artisan would have selected a hammerstone and a sharp flint bearing, a pointed engraving tool. Each cut into that hard limestone would have required precise, controlled force. Too soft a strike and the line would be faint, too hard and the stone could fracture, ruining months of work. This was not mere brute strength, it was a delicate dance between hand, tool, and material. The carvers had to possess an intimate, almost intuitive understanding of the stone's grain, its hardness, and its points of weakness. They worked with the rock, not just against it, following its natural contours to bring their visions to life. The sheer labor involved is almost incomprehensible. A single square foot of such detailed relief could have taken weeks to complete. For pillars covered from top to bottom in these intricate scenes, the investment of time is a measure of value. This was not a hobby, it was a sacred vocation. The consistency is another profound clue. Walk from one enclosure to another, and you will see the same artistic style, the same conventions for depicting a boar's tusk or a vulture's wing. This uniformity across decades, even centuries of construction, tells us this skill was not left to chance. It was taught. It suggests the existence of master artists, perhaps what we might think of as a proto-guild. These skilled individuals would have taken on apprentices, passing down not just the technical know-how of flint knapping and stone carving, but the sacred symbolic language itself, the correct way to depict the guardian scorpion, the proper posture of the ancestral T-shape. This transmission of specialized knowledge is a hallmark of a complex society. It means they were thinking generationally, planning for a future where their symbolic world would continue. In the silent language of these carvings, we see a society that placed immense cultural capital on symbolic expression. They believed that representing the world, the animals, the ancestors, the spirits was an act of power and importance worthy of consuming lifetimes of skilled labor. The stone is their parchment, the flint their pen. We are left staring at a beautifully composed message, knowing it is full of meaning, but still struggling to learn how to read the words. Yet this masterpiece of stone was not a single, frozen moment in time. The hill itself holds a layered history, a chronicle of change written in soil and architecture. Through careful excavation, archaeologists have peeled back the years to reveal at least two major, distinct phases of construction and use, spanning an incredible period of over 1,500 years. That is a longer continuous history than the entire lifespan of ancient Rome. The oldest layer, known as Layer 3, is where we find the giants. This phase, dating from around 9,600 to 8,800 years before the Common Era, contains the monumental circular enclosures that have captivated the world. These are the grand, awe-inspiring circles with their massive central pillars and intricate animal carvings, the iconic image of Göbekli Tepe that shatters our timelines. This was the era of its most ambitious vision, when hunter-gatherer societies poured their collective spirit into building these colossal stone forests. Then, centuries later, something shifted. In the layer above, known as Layer 2, dating from about 8,800 to 8,000 years before the Common Era, the architecture transforms. The grand circles give way to smaller, rectangular rooms. The pillars within them are more modest in size, and the elaborate animal reliefs become less frequent. The artistic flourishes seem to recede. This is not a story of decline, but one of evolution. The site was adapting. The change in layout from vast, open circles to smaller, more compartmentalized spaces suggests a parallel change in how people gathered and what rituals they performed. Perhaps large, regional congregations became less common, giving way to more frequent, smaller group ceremonies. This architectural shift mirrors the larger transformation happening across the landscape. Remember, this 1,500-year period coincides precisely with the dawn of agriculture, as people began to settle in permanent villages, to tend fields and herd animals. Their relationship to the land and to each other fundamentally changed. Their need for a massive, central gathering place for nomadic bands may have gradually diminished. The site evolved to serve a society that was itself in motion, transitioning from a world of the wild hunt to a world of cultivated fields. This incredible longevity is perhaps the most powerful testament to Göbekli Tepe's importance. For over a millennium and a half, generation after generation returned to this hill. They maintained it, they modified it, and they ultimately chose to respectfully retire its oldest parts. It was not an abandoned project, but a living, breathing institution, a sacred constant that provided stability and meaning even as the human world around it underwent its greatest revolution. The silent stones found their most eloquent interpreter in a man named Klaus Schmidt. For nearly 2 decades, from 1995 until his passing in 2014, this archaeologist from the German Archaeological Institute lived and breathed Göbekli Tepe. He was not just its excavator, he became its guardian, its fiercest advocate, and the architect of the revolutionary idea that this was the world's first temple. When others might have rushed to unearth every pillar at once, Schmidt championed a philosophy of meticulous, deliberate slowness. He understood that the true value was not in how much dirt you could move, but in how much information you could preserve. Every fragment of bone, every fleck of charcoal, every subtle change in the soil was a word in the story he was trying to read. This patient, scientific rigor protected the site from becoming a mere spectacle. He shielded it from those who would overlay wild, unsupported theories onto its ancient stones, insisting instead on letting the evidence speak for itself, one careful brushstroke at a time. Schmidt's greatest insight was to see the forest for the trees. While the monumental pillars were staggering, he recognized they were part of a much larger, more profound picture. He famously said that uncovering Göbekli Tepe was not like finding a summit, but like discovering an entire mountain. He knew they had only scratched the surface of a lost cultural world, a complete belief system and social structure that this temple anchored. His dedication was absolute. Year after year, through scorching summers and biting winters, he returned to the hill, piecing together a narrative that challenged everything he had been taught about human prehistory. His work stands as a powerful testament to how a single individual, armed with curiosity and relentless dedication, can pry open a door to a past we never knew existed. Klaus Schmidt did not just discover a site, he gave us a new lens through which to see our own journey, reminding us that history is not a closed book, but a story constantly being rewritten by those willing to listen to the whispers in the earth. Every groundbreaking discovery invites scrutiny, and Göbekli Tepe is no exception. A healthy scientific debate surrounds the site, with researchers offering alternative interpretations that challenge the dominant temple narrative. Some archaeologists point out that evidence for small-scale, temporary habitation might be underreported. They note findings of stone tools for food processing, like grinding slabs and mortars, and the remains of butchered animals. These clues suggest that while people did not live there permanently, they certainly stayed long enough to eat, work, and perhaps support the builders. This leads to a nuanced view that Göbekli Tepe was not purely a cathedral in the wilderness, but a multifunctional hub where the sacred and the practical intertwined. The rituals may have been the main event, but they were supported by feasting, tool-making, and the everyday social exchanges of a large gathering. The astronomical claims have sparked particularly lively discussion. The idea that the enclosures were precise observatories aligned with stars or solstices is captivating, but critics urge caution. They argue that the alignments measured are not precise enough to be conclusive, and that without written records, we cannot know the celestial knowledge of the builders. A pillar that seems to frame the winter solstice sunrise might be a coincidence of its placement within the circle. This skepticism is not meant to diminish the site's wonder, but to uphold rigorous standards. It reminds us that separating our modern desire for patterns from the actual intentions of ancient people is one of archaeology's greatest challenges. These debates are not a sign of weakness in the story of Göbekli Tepe. They are the very engine of scientific understanding. A discovery that everyone accepts without question would quickly become dogma, a closed chapter. The controversies keep the investigation dynamic and alive. They force researchers to look harder, to re-examine the soil samples, to create more detailed digital models of the sightlines, and to remain open to new evidence. This process of challenge and refinement ensures that our evolving narrative of this ancient hill is built on a solid foundation, not on romantic speculation. It is through this collaborative, sometimes contentious, dialogue that we come closer to hearing the true whispers of the past, ensuring that Göbekli Tepe remains an open question, not a settled answer. The implications of this discovery cannot be contained within a single hillside in Turkey. Göbekli Tepe sends a seismic ripple through the entire field of archaeology. compelling researchers on every continent to re-examine their most basic assumptions. For over a century, the story of human ascent followed a neat, linear path, a ladder with clearly marked rungs: agriculture, settlement, civilization. This temple shatters that ladder. It proves that a different sequence was not only possible, but actually occurred in one of humanity's most important heartlands. This single fact forces a humbling and exhilarating question: if this happened here, what else have we missed? What other chapters of our deep past remain buried, not because the evidence is gone, but because we have been looking for the wrong things, interpreting ancient sites through the lens of a story that was incomplete? Suddenly, every early megalithic site around the world demands a second look. The massive shell mounds built by indigenous communities along the coasts of North America, once seen simply as large refuse piles, might hold clues to complex social gatherings and ritual landscapes. The intricate stone arrangements and songlines of Aboriginal Australia, passed down through oral tradition for tens of thousands of years, speak to a symbolic and territorial sophistication that may have very ancient roots. The standing stones of Nabta Playa in the Sahara, older than Stonehenge, now fit into a broader, emerging pattern of early astronomical interest. Göbekli Tepe gives us permission to ask new questions of these places. Were they also centers for seasonal gatherings that wove scattered groups into a larger whole? Did they serve as anchors for mythologies and identities long before permanent villages appeared? The temple suggests that the human drive to mark the landscape, to cooperate on a grand scale, and to encode meaning in monumental form is not a product of advanced agriculture. It is a fundamental part of who we are, a capacity that emerged while we still lived as hunters and foragers. This recalibration shifts the search. Archaeologists are now encouraged to look for signs of social complexity, not in the ruins of cities, but in the patterns of seasonal sites, in the distribution of rare materials across vast distances, and in the subtle art left on landscapes that nomadic people called home. The story of civilization is no longer a single, inevitable march. It is a tapestry of experiments, of different groups in different environments discovering different ways to be human together. Some of those experiments, like the one on Potbelly Hill, succeeded on a breathtaking scale, only to be gently returned to the earth, their lessons waiting millennia to be heard. This global perspective does not diminish other cultures, it enriches our shared narrative. It suggests that the spark of complex thought and collective action could ignite anywhere the conditions were right, long before the written word or the walled city. We are left with a world far more ancient and intellectually vibrant than we imagined, a planet dotted with potential Göbekli Tepes, each one a silent invitation to rewrite a local history, and in doing so, to deepen our understanding of the incredible, creative species we all belong to. But this fragile wonder, unearthed after 12,000 years of slumber, now faces a new and urgent challenge: its own preservation. For millennia, the earth itself was its perfect guardian, a thick blanket of soil that shielded the delicate limestone carvings from wind, rain, and the relentless sun. The very act of excavation that revealed its glory also exposed its vulnerability. The stone, once protected in a stable, dark environment, is now subject to the elements. The region experiences extreme temperature swings, from freezing winters to scorching summers, causing the stone to expand and contract microscopically, a slow, insidious stress. Wind-blown sand can act like a gentle but persistent sandpaper on the carved surfaces, and even rainwater, slightly acidic, can gradually dissolve the limestone over time. The monumental pillars that withstood the ages while buried are now in a race against a different kind of time. The immense global interest in the site, while a triumph for awareness, introduces another layer of complexity. Thousands of visitors now walk the grounds each year, And even with the best intentions, the sheer weight of human presence brings risks, from the oils on fingertips touching the stone to the vibration of footsteps on the ancient bedrock. The mission has dramatically shifted from one of discovery to one of guardianship. In response, archaeologists and the Turkish Ministry of Culture and Tourism have undertaken a massive conservation project. They have constructed vast, lightweight protective shelters over the key excavated enclosures. These are not mere tops, but engineered structures designed to shield the stones from direct rainfall and harsh sunlight while allowing airflow to prevent moisture buildup, essentially creating a controlled microclimate. Raised walkways now guide visitors along specific paths, protecting the archaeological layers below and ensuring no one accidentally steps on a fragile artifact. Access to the most sensitive areas is carefully managed. This ongoing work represents a delicate, constant balancing act. It is a triangle of competing priorities: rigorous scientific research, active physical conservation, and the public's right to witness this marvel. Each decision must weigh the need to learn more against the risk of causing harm. To study the site is to interact with it, and every interaction leaves a trace. The goal is to minimize that trace, to be the most gentle of stewards. This is because preserving Göbekli Tepe transcends the protection of old stones. It is about safeguarding a unique and irreplaceable chapter of the human story. This site is a library written in architecture and symbol, a library that is only just beginning to be read. Future generations, armed with technologies we cannot yet conceive, will need this primary source material intact. They will have new questions, and they will deserve to find the stones waiting, their stories still legible. Every protective measure is a promise to those future explorers, a commitment that the whispers from our deepest past will not be silenced by the negligence of our present. The profound mystery of Göbekli Tepe has inevitably spilled beyond academic journals and into the realm of modern myth. This ancient temple, a blank slate of such staggering age, has become a powerful canvas for our collective imagination. You can find its echoes in best-selling novels, in dramatic documentary specials, and even in the digital landscapes of popular video games. In these stories, the site is often presented as a key piece of a much grander and often more sensational puzzle. It becomes evidence for a lost, advanced civilization wiped from memory, or a beacon constructed with the help of ancient star travelers. It is sometimes tied to dramatic geological theories, like the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which proposes a comet strike around 12,800 years ago that radically changed the climate. While mainstream archaeology finds no evidence to support these specific narratives, their widespread appeal is itself a fascinating phenomenon. It speaks to a deep, almost primal public desire to look at our origins and see not just a slow grind of progress, but epic stories of forgotten golden ages and world-altering catastrophes. There is a hunger for narratives that challenge the official, sometimes dry, textbook version of history, a desire to believe that our past holds secrets more thrilling than we have yet uncovered. This pop culture embrace is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is incredibly effective. A dramatic television special or a blockbuster game can introduce millions of people to Göbekli Tepe who might never pick up an archaeology journal. This global spotlight generates public interest, which in turn can translate into vital funding for conservation and further research. It makes the site matter to people on an emotional level, not just an intellectual one. Yet, on the other hand, it can create a confusing echo chamber where compelling fiction becomes entangled with established fact in the public mind. The danger is not in imagination, but in the replacement of evidence-based understanding with purely speculative storytelling. This tension highlights a crucial balancing act. We must celebrate the powerful allure of the unknown that Göbekli Tepe represents, that sense of wonder that draws us all in. At the same time, we must champion the patient, meticulous work of science that slowly, carefully translates that wonder into knowledge. The real story of this temple, of hunter-gatherers achieving the impossible through sheer collective will and belief, is arguably more astonishing than any fiction about alien architects. It is a story about our own species' capacity for cooperation, artistry, and spiritual depth at the very dawn of our journey. The pop culture myths, in their own way, are a testament to the site's raw power. They prove that Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological dig, but a mirror. We look into its deep, stone-lined wells and see our own endless fascination with the question of where we came from and who we might have been, reflected back at us in the silent faces of the pillars. The vast majority of Göbekli Tepe still sleeps beneath the earth. After decades of work, archaeologists estimate they have only uncovered between 5 and 10% of the entire site. This simple fact is both thrilling and humbling. Every stunning discovery we have discussed, every monumental circle and carved pillar, represents just a tiny fraction of what the hill contains. The rest remains a promise, a series of silent questions waiting in the dark soil. What other enclosures lie buried, perfectly preserved? Could there be circles even older and more elaborate than the ones we have found, pushing the origins of this tradition back further into the mist of prehistory? The potential for future revelation is almost limitless. To peer into this hidden world without disturbing it, researchers use advanced tools like ground-penetrating radar and geomagnetic surveys. These technologies send pulses into the earth, mapping the density of what lies below. The results are captivating. The surveys reveal a hilltop absolutely riddled with anomalies, dozens of distinct geometric shapes echoing the known enclosures. The data paints a picture of a veritable honeycomb of stone structures, a sprawling complex of perhaps 20 or more additional circles still completely intact under the turf. Each one of those blips on the screen is a future chapter, a sealed time capsule holding artifacts, carvings, and organic material that could tell us entirely new stories about the people who built them. The excavation is therefore a deliberate, generational project. Each digging season is a careful choice, a decision about which story to uncover next. Every new trench holds the potential for a find that could refine our current understanding or shatter it completely. One new pillar, one unique carving, or one cache of tools could redefine the purpose of the entire site. This slow, respectful pace is not a lack of progress. It is a recognition of the site's infinite value. They are not just digging for objects, they are reading a fragile, 12,000-year-old manuscript, one delicate page at a time. But the story does not end at the foot of this one hill. To truly understand Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists have widened their gaze to the entire region. They now see it not as a lone, inexplicable monument, but as the likely center of a vast cultural network. Recent excavations at a nearby site called Karahan Tepe have ignited tremendous excitement. Often described as a sister site, Karahan Tepe features similar T-shaped pillars and elaborate animal carvings from roughly the same era. It appears to be another major ceremonial center, part of the same cultural and spiritual world. This changes the narrative profoundly. Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated miracle. It was part of a constellation of sacred sites, a connected landscape of belief where people moved and gathered across a territory. The ongoing work now focuses on mapping this network, finding the paths that connected these places, and understanding how different sites might have served different functions within a shared ritual calendar. Were there sites for initiation, for seasonal festivals, for honoring specific ancestors? The goal is to move from studying a single breathtaking temple to reconstructing the living, breathing civilization that created it. Every new stone uncovered, whether here or at a neighboring hill, is a piece of that grand puzzle. The future of this research is not about finding a single answer, but about listening to an entire conversation that died away millennia ago, a conversation we are only now beginning to hear. The true legacy of Göbekli Tepe is not measured in years, but in what it reveals about the human spirit. Beneath the scientific analysis of carbon dates and architectural techniques lies a more profound truth, a message from our ancestors about who we are at our core. This ancient temple shows us that the drive to create meaning, to reach for something beyond mere survival, is not a luxury of modern life. It is a fundamental part of our blueprint, as old as humanity itself. Long before we wrote laws or built cities, we were building cathedrals of stone to house our questions about the universe, our place within it, and the community that gave us strength. The immense labor, the generations of dedication, all point to a powerful, shared belief that gave their world order and purpose. That urge to connect, to belong to a story larger than our individual lives, is a thread that runs unbroken from those stone carvers to us today. What does this tell us about our capacity for cooperation? The standard narrative often paints early human history as a brutal struggle, a world of competition where only the fittest survived. Göbekli Tepe offers a radiant counterpoint. It is a monument not to conflict but to collaboration. To move those pillars, to feed those workers, to pass the artistic knowledge down through generations, required a breathtaking level of trust, communication, and shared vision. It proves that our ability to come together for a common goal, to submerge individual effort into a collective achievement, is a deep-seated human capability. This was not a society commanded by kings or enforced by soldiers. It was likely inspired by storytellers, spiritual leaders, and master artisans, people who could unite others not through force but through the power of a shared dream. In that sense, the temple is the ultimate proof of concept, showing that humanity's greatest leaps forward have always been fueled by our ability to work together toward a vision of the future. In its silent, enduring presence, Göbekli Tepe also speaks to our hunger for legacy. Those builders knew they were creating something they would never see finished. They carved their symbols not on perishable wood or fleeting sand, but into the very bones of the earth, ensuring their message, their identity, their reverence for the wild world would echo across millennia. They were planting a flag in time, declaring, "We were here, and this is what we believed mattered." This desire to leave a mark, to contribute to a story that outlasts our own brief lives, is a profoundly human trait. We see it in the art we create, the families we raise, the communities we build. The people of Göbekli Tepe simply expressed it on the most monumental scale imaginable for their time. Their legacy was not written in ink but in intention, a promise to the future carved in limestone. Ultimately, this 12,000-year-old temple holds up a mirror. When we look at those T-shaped pillars, we are not just looking at a mysterious archaeological find. We are looking at a reflection of our own deepest desires for purpose, for connection, and for meaning. It reminds us that the questions that likely occupied those ancient gatherers, who are we, why are we here, how do we live together, are the very same questions that shape our lives today. Their answer was to build a sacred hill where heaven met earth, where the community gathered, and where memory was set in stone. Our answers take different forms, but the impulse is identical. Göbekli Tepe's most enduring gift is this sense of kinship across an unimaginable gulf of time. It tells us that the essence of being human, our creativity, our spirituality, and our incredible capacity for cooperative wonder has always been our greatest strength. The temple stands as a silent, powerful witness, a message from the dawn of our journey that continues to resonate, asking us what we, in our own time, will choose to build together. 300 miles from the lonely hill of Göbekli Tepe, a very different kind of wonder was taking root. Around 7,500 years before the Common Era, people began to build a place called Çatalhöyük. This was not a ceremonial center of towering pillars, but a sprawling, densely packed town, a honeycomb of mud brick houses so close together that residents moved across the rooftops, descending into their homes through holes in the ceiling. Here we see the full flowering of the settled life that Göbekli Tepe only hinted at. It is a world apart in form, yet startlingly familiar in spirit. The walls of Çatalhöyük are not limestone monoliths, but they are just as eloquent. They are covered in vibrant paintings, intricate plaster reliefs, and installations that speak to a rich symbolic world. Bulls, leopards, and vultures are depicted with a reverence and artistic flair that directly echoes the stone menagerie carved centuries earlier on the distant hill. The focus remains on the power of the wild, even as domesticated animals began to appear in their daily life. Within the homes, another profound connection emerges. Archaeologists have found that the residents buried their family members beneath the floors of their houses, often directly under sleeping platforms. This practice of keeping the ancestors physically close, of integrating them into the fabric of daily domestic life, feels like a direct cultural descendant of the veneration hinted at by the curated skulls and towering ancestor pillars of Göbekli Tepe. The sacred was brought indoors, woven into the very foundation of the home. This is not to say Çatalhöyük was built by the direct descendants of Göbekli Tepe's builders, but rather that both sites are part of the same cultural river flowing through ancient Anatolia. Göbekli Tepe represents the powerful, collective upstream surge, where scattered groups united around a shared sacred project. Çatalhöyük represents the downstream delta, where those impulses toward community, symbolism, and shared identity settled into a new, permanent pattern of urban living. One was a seasonal cathedral that helped forge a common culture. The other was the full-time town that culture could eventually build. The artistic traditions, the symbolic focus on animals and ancestors, and the deep sense of communal identity form a bridge across the centuries and the miles. This connection is crucial because it transforms Göbekli Tepe from a bizarre, isolated anomaly into a pioneering chapter in a long story. It was not a dead end, but a bold, early experiment in how to be human together. The social cohesion, the organizational skills, and the symbolic language developed or solidified at that hilltop gathering place may have provided the very template for the more complex, sedentary societies that followed. The temple did not just predict the town, it helped make it possible, proving that the human journey from monumental gathering to dense urban life was not a sudden leap, but a continuum of cultural innovation. Göbekli Tepe is that key, turning in a lock we did not know existed, opening a door to a forgotten room in the vast mansion of human history. For over a century, we furnished that mansion with a simple, orderly narrative, a straight hallway leading from the cave to the farm to the city. This temple shatters that hallway, revealing instead a sprawling, interconnected web of chambers, each one a different experiment in what it means to be a community. Our journey was never a single, inevitable march. It was a tapestry of social, spiritual, and technological innovations, woven together far earlier and with more intricate patterns than our textbooks ever described. The people of this hill were not primitive precursors, they were pioneers, architects of a collective dream that required rewriting the rules of their own world. This realization does more than update a timeline, it challenges a deep-seated arrogance about the past. We have a tendency to look back and see our ancestors as simpler versions of ourselves, struggling toward the light of our modern understanding. Göbekli Tepe humbles that view entirely. It presents us with a society of profound sophistication, not in our terms of technology, but in terms of social cohesion, symbolic thought, and sheer visionary ambition. They achieved something we struggle to fully explain even with all our tools and knowledge. That is a powerful lesson in respect. It asks us to listen more carefully to the silent stories told by stone and soil, to acknowledge that intelligence and complexity have always worn many different faces. As the work continues, with ground-penetrating radar mapping unseen chambers and each new season's brushstroke revealing another detail, Göbekli Tepe stands as a permanent reminder. History is not a fixed story written in stone. It is an ongoing conversation with the past, a discovery that is never truly finished. The most profound truths about who we are, about our capacity for wonder, cooperation, and meaning, often lie buried, waiting just beneath the surface for the curious, the patient, and the respectful to dig a little deeper. What other rooms in that vast mansion remain locked, their contents whispering to us from the darkness, ready to change everything we think